you were pretty quick to criticize the people of Houston for wanting to build, you thought, McMansions, but you don't criticize your own university?
I don't find that to be equivocal comparison between space meant for students who must reside at a university.
You don't see the hypocrisy in that?
It is your finding and interpretation, sir.
But you don't see the irony of the hypocrisy?
I'm going to go ahead and say no.
Okay. I kind of gathered that would be your answer.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Governor. Professor Keenan, you teach at Tulane?
Yes, sir, I do. I have that privilege.
And you have your own website, KeenanClimate.com, is that right?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. And you describe yourself on your website as a globally recognized thought leader. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you give paid speeches, do you?
On occasion, I do.
You have your own agent, I believe, according to your website, Lee Bureau.
This is correct.
And how much do you charge per speech?
It varies depending on the audience, the amount of preparation work that goes, and the amount of follow-through. Usually,
The last paid speech you gave, how much did you receive?
I'm happy to follow up on.
You don't remember?
I do not.
Do you give that money to Tulane?
I do not.
You keep it?
Yes, this is outside of my capacity as a professor.
Right.
As is standard
now,
course.
You recently sent a letter you recently joined a lot of other academics. You signed a letter demanding that elite institutions and universities stop accepting money from fossil fuel companies. Is that correct?
This is correct.
You consider Tulane an elite university?
I would like to think that we have a high standard of excellence in our education and our research.
Okay. Well, the Murphy family of Murphy Oil and the Deming family of Murphy Oil have recently given Tulane $25 million. Have you called on Tulane to give that money back?
Well, it's not, they didn't give that money to my unit or the department or school that I work in.
Have you called on Tulane to give that money back, or you think that's okay for them to keep it?
It's their prerogative, not mine.
Okay. Yet you just signed a letter saying that all elite universities should refuse fossil fuel money. Did you put a footnote in there and say, except my own?
Well, what I'd like to say, Senator, is that I believe it raises a conflict of interest for those that research climate change that are supported by the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah, but then why don't you ask Tulane to give the $25 million back?
Well, I think in the context, if that money were to be used to support climate research, information, disinformation, or whatever it may be, then that may be an appropriate conflict of interest. But I think in the context of which
you don't see the hypocrisy here?
It is a hypocrisy in those that may read and interpret it as such.
Maybe it's like Washington. If there weren't double standards, there wouldn't be standards at all. Let me ask you this. You also participated in another article here criticizing Houston for building new buildings and McMansions. And you said, I'm going to read your quote. I don't want to misquote you, Professor. That means we have to change our consumer preferences. You could have a super efficient, energy efficient mega mansion in Houston or the suburbs, but it's still a mansion. You're still over-consuming space. Did you say that?
Yes, sir. That's based on work as a member of the IPCC. Our research suggested that reducing our footprint in terms of total spatial footprint would have significant impacts on the decarbonization of the built environment.
And so you're saying that people should live in smaller houses because larger houses contribute to CO2 emissions?
100%, Senator.
Okay. Well, recently, Tulane finished the Commons. It was 77,000 square feet, $55 million. Recently, Tulane finished the Gold Ring Woldenberg Business Complex, $35 million to complete, 92,000 square feet. Boy, that's a McMansion. Mustapher Hall, 23,000 square feet. Paul Hall, 36,000 square feet. Richardson Hall, 50,000 square feet. Housing redevelopment phase 1, 230,000 square feet at Tulane. Have you called upon Tulane to stop these buildings?
Sir, the habitable space within those units are roughly the size of the conference room back there and are indeed quite
But they
small.
contribute to, does...
Everything that we
does
do,
the,
sir,
the
contributes.
Commons contribute more to climate change than a McMansion in Houston? You were pretty quick to criticize the people of Houston for wanting to build, you thought, McMansions, but you don't criticize your own university?
I don't find that to be equivocal comparison between space meant for students who must reside at a university.
You don't see
and
the
those that-
hypocrisy in that?
It is your finding and interpretation, sir.
But you don't see the irony of the hypocrisy?
I'm going to go ahead and say no.
Okay. I kind of gathered that would be your answer. Governor, good to see you. You live in a big house, don't you?
Currently, I do, yes.
How big is the governor's mansion?
I don't know the square footage, but it's large, and it's 60 years old this year. You ought to come by and
I
see-
need to
see
get
the
by.
work.
Well, the professor from Tulane doesn't like that. Let me ask you, do you think it's fair? Look, John Bell, we get 37.5% of offshore royalties under Go Mesa. New Mexico gets 50% share from the federal government, for God's sakes. Wyoming gets 50%. North Dakota gets 50%. We get 37.5%, and we got to share it with 4 other states.
And it's capped at $375 million that we get to share no matter.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Now, that just sucks.
I don't think it's fair, and 90% of all Gulf oil and gas exploration production activities are served out of Port Fourchon. So we bear the brunt of the infrastructure necessary to make all of that happen, but we're not sharing the way other states share, and it's one of the reasons I thank the members of this committee while you were out for the ones who co-sponsored the RISE Act, because it is incredibly important for a state like Louisiana, and we constitutionally dedicate every dollar we get, as you know, to the coast.
All we're asking is to be treated like everybody else, aren't we?
Yes, sir.
And we have a solution, don't we?
We do.
And it's called the RISE Act. Tell us about the RISE Act.
Well, it's a wonderful piece of legislation that we are obviously hoping that you pass, not only for the benefits that you just mentioned, but currently there's no revenue sharing mechanism in place in federal law with respect to wind. We'll have the first offshore wind lease sale next month. And so this is a very real thing for us, especially as we look at the loss of the BP Horizon fines that have been paying. In fact, the Mid-Barataria, $2.9 billion paid for with BP dollars. But those go away in 2031. We really need to replace that revenue, and wind energy gives us an opportunity, but we need that structure in place, and I appreciate your work on that.
Well, to be blunt, we've proven we can use the money well, and we've put our own money up, and it is patently unfair that other states get a larger share, much larger share than Louisiana. And I think the RISE Act, which will also help our wind industry, as Senator Whitehouse knows, we're working together on, is long overdue. And I appreciate you coming up here to talk about that bill. I was in Judiciary, that's why I was late. And the chairman's been very generous with allowing me to go over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Yagan, am I saying your name right? Tell me, if you were king for a day and you could rewrite America's tax code, tell me the 3 changes you would make.
Number 1, I would equalize labor and capital tax burdens at the top. There are a couple ways of doing that. The billionaire minimum income tax is one that would move in that direction. I won't rehash those details. Senator Johnson actually talked about a corporate tax integration type.
What's number 2?
Sure. Number two, part of closing the labor and capital disparity is closing the Gingrich-Edwards loophole. And number three is ending abuse of trusts. So the estate tax has been eviscerated. Many of those, you take assets that you know are worth a lot. Right now, they're purportedly worth a little because you haven't taken your company public. You put them into a trust, it explodes.
Do you support a wealth tax? Do you know what I mean by wealth tax?
I do know what you mean by wealth tax. The billionaire minimum income tax taxes income, and that I think is the way forward in that space.
Well, let me be a little more precise. Do you think appreciation of assets that are not sold, unrealized gain, should be taxed?
I think you should have to prepay tax on it that will eventually be due at sale, gift, or bequest.
What do you mean prepay the tax?
Sure. So if I have $5 billion of unrealized capital gains, I have $5 billion of taxable income, and I'm currently paying $1.5 billion on that. So that's a 15% overall tax rate.
Well, let's don't complicate this. I want to understand
Sure.
what you're saying. Let's suppose an American owns a piece of real estate they inherited from their father or their mother. And it was, when they inherited it, they got to step up in basis. It's worth $100,000. And all of a sudden, the interstate came through. And the property is now worth $1 million if they sell it. But they don't plan to sell it. They're going to leave it to the kids. Do you think that Americans should have to pay tax on the unrealized gain, the increase in value?
In general, no. At that level of wealth, for example, housing.
You think only wealthy people should?
At the very top, it's hard to tax,
But let me be sure I understand what you're
Sure.
saying. All right, let's suppose that's not just an average American. Let's suppose that's an American. What do you define as rich?
In the minimum income tax, it's $100 million of wealth or more.
Okay,
That's
so you think if you're really wealthy, you should have to pay a tax on your unrealized gain?
I think you should have to partially prepay if you're liquid, if you have liquidity to pay.
Do you think somebody? Why can't you economists answer questions? Should any American have to pay tax on unrealized gain? Why can't you just answer me?
Yes, there are some who should.
Who?
The ultra wealthy who have liquidity should prepay some tax.
What
on
if they
that.
don't have liquidity?
They should not have to pay, and they will owe at sale, bequest, or gift
So if you have cash, you ought to have to pay, but if you don't have to pay?
to prepay. I have in my testimony, there are examples of how this works so that you can preserve incentives to build a new company, take it public.
Okay,
While
what do you
also-
think, Dr. McBride? Do you think we should start taxing unrealized gain? And what do you think that'll do to the economy?
Well, I have several concerns about the approach. The first of which is it's completely untested. It's never been tried in this country. We have more than 100 years of history with the income tax, and
Europe's tried it, haven't they?
no, they've tried wealth taxes.
Yeah.
Their experience
How'd that
with
turn
wealth
out?
taxes has
How did
been
that turn out?
bad. It
Why is
resulted
that?
in a lot of taxpayers exiting the country, for one thing. In France, for instance, other countries that have tried it. And you suddenly lose a big chunk of your tax base that you're trying to tax there. We have that option in this country as well. The result has been that most of those countries in Europe that have tried a wealth tax have rolled them back,
Yeah.
including France, because they were administratively challenging. The basic challenge is what you're describing, trying to value assets without real market transactions. So this is a valuation dispute. It means we get the IRS engaged in yet another challenge. They're currently doing this with the estate tax. Those estates that are subject to the estate tax, those valuation episodes can go years and years and years.
Can I have 30 more seconds?
Proceed.
Dr. Is it Clausing? Clausing?
Yes.
Yeah. Why do you and Dr. Yagan, why do y'all want to punish wealthy people?
I think I can speak for both of us that we're not interested in punishing anyone. We're interested
Well,
in
you're
having
interested
a
in taxing
fiscal
the hell out of them
system.
more than anybody else.
I think
Why,
the
what makes you
reforms
think?
that Professor
What makes you think that making tax policy on the basis of class or status makes sense?
I think it's a very American phenomena that throughout the history of the income tax, we have valued progressivity, and our current income tax does that. We used to rely on things like tariffs to raise revenue. Tariffs are regressive consumption taxes that disproportionately hurt the poor. We believe in this country that those with the greater ability to pay should pay more of the burden. And that's part of what a healthy capitalism does. It enables people to gain from things like trade and technological change and business innovation, and to contribute a little more to the fiscal system when they're very successful in doing so. And I think that that's a very legitimate way to structure the tax system.
Can
And
I ask you a question?
Yes.
Why do you think so many wealthy people are leaving New York City?
New York City is, an incredible city of innovation, immigration, entrepreneurship.
Yeah, but why are so many wealthy people leaving?
I think there are big advantages to living near centers of entrepreneurial activity, and we see that on the west.
You think they're leaving to be nearer to centers of entrepreneurial activity, do you?
Well, I don't think there are a lot of people, fleeing New York City. That New York City has.
Sure, there are. There are thousands. I mean, there have been study after study after study. Why are so many wealthy people leaving New York City?
I think there's an enormous number of wealthy people who are in New York City and continue.
But why are so many leaving?
I can't speak to why particular people.
I can
leave.
tell you
I
why.
know
It's
that-
taxes. You know that as well as I do. It's
I
taxes.
think if you look at the economic,
Some of it's crime, but most of it is taxes.
well,
People vote with their feet. The same reason that people are leaving California and moving to Austin.
If you look at California, it's one of the most successful economies in the world, and it continues to be so. It attracts people.
But they're
as
losing
well.
people.
I don't think it's in any danger of decline, nor is New York City. And these are very vibrant places.
I don't think we're going to
for
ever
fundamental
agree.
reasons. Yeah.
I don't think we're going to ever agree. But I appreciate the time of all three of you.
Thank you.
To be fair, there also are people moving the other way. There are people who move to New York. They just don't all leave from New York. It's a two-way street in and out of New York, and it's a two-way street between Austin and California. People leave Texas and go to California, and some of them do very well.
Well, that's true, Sheldon, but I can show you study after study after study, as you well know, and as the professor knows. It shows that people are leaving high-tax states and moving to low-tax states. All you have to do is
Well, they
look at
also leave,
all you have to do is look at the demographics. Pick the 9 states that have, say, a state income tax, and compare that, or that don't have a state income tax, and compare that to the states that do. It's called tax avoidance, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly legal.
People have different preferences. If you look at where immigrants choose to live in the United States, they often go to those same places that you were talking about. So I do think that, there's movement in both directions.
Yeah, but here's here's my point. Mm-hmm. Here's what I think rational people do, and here's what I bet all three of you would do, and I bet Sheldon would do it because he's a smart guy. Okay, if he won the lottery tomorrow and won $10 million and paid his taxes and has $6 million left, he's going to at least consider, you are too, moving to Florida because
No, I
they don't have a
wouldn't.
state income tax.
For the record, no, I wouldn't. Never crossed my mind.
Well, most rational. Well, I don't mean you're irrational. Sheldon, you know that. But
It can be quite rational to not want to
But
live
when
in
you're
Florida
liquid,
right now.
when you're liquid, and you don't have to pay a 6% off the top versus 0%, it's a rational economic move, is it not?
I agree. It's rational. I mean, the thing about taxes that we're talking about is they're a cost or a price, and so claiming that this cost or price doesn't matter is essentially throwing out the very basic law of demand the basic fundamental idea in economics that prices matter, that costs matter.
See, this is what this always boils down to, and there's no way we'll ever agree, okay? But at least two of you believe that government, all things being equal, can spend a dollar better than people can. And that's your this is America. You can believe that.
For the record, that's not in their testimony.
I just don't agree with you. I think people can spend the dollar better, all things being equal. And all you have to do, if you know the history of government, you know that I'm right. But I don't expect you to agree with me because you're professors. Okay? Thanks, Sheldon.